Hello and welcome to the FatBoss Guide to General Nazgrim 10-man normal in the Siege of Orgrimmar.
Hello!
Now this encounter, to be fair, it's a little bit dull.
It is, you could say it's somewhat dull. It does kind of evolve a little bit as he gains more rage throughout the fight, you could say. But it's definitely not one of the more thrilling encounters. But yeah, it's still a good encounter. It's got some solid mechanics and everything, and I think it's quite rewarding anyway.
So for this encounter you want to bring 2 tanks, 2 to 3 healers and a mixed DPS makeup. And this really is just a one-phase fight.
Yes.
It doesn't really change too much. And the fight is very execution-based, so even small mistakes that your raid team make will wipe you. So it's very, very important that you understand all the abilities or you can be comboed.
The boss revolves around a rage mechanic. Now he has several abilities that will both generate and spend his rage. And first off, we're going to talk about the main one that he does to generate his rage, which is Sundering Blow. Now this does 600k physical damage to the tank and reduces their armor by 10% for 30 seconds. So this is just the tank debuff. However, it does generate 5 rage and 5 additional rage per stack. So say you have 4 stacks on you. That means that the boss will gain 20 rage and then another 5 rage because he used the ability. So just make sure your stacks don't go too high. You can swap around, I think, 3 or 4 stacks, and that's probably the best sort of range to do it in.
Yeah, in the most of the footage where you're watching now, the stacks are sort of going above 10 in some cases. But that's just tanks being whores trying to get vengeance. But generally, keep it around the 3 mark because the more rage the boss has, the more abilities will start coming in and the more deadly those abilities are. And we'll start talking about how they work in a minute.
Now, another ability that doesn't actually generate rage and has nothing really to do with the rage mechanic, however, is very important, is Bone Cracker. Now, throughout the fight, the boss will basically throw a debuff on a random player that reduces the player's maximum HP by 10% and also gives them a bleed effect on them for, it does about 40k damage per second for 30 seconds. So, because it does reduce your maximum HP and a lot of the moves in this fight do a very high amount of burst damage, you can actually get one hit by like 1 or 2 of the mechanics. So
yeah, you can be like almost comboed. If 2 abilities hit you at the same time, or if healers are slightly slow, you can die in a very, very short amount of time. And the bleed itself, obviously 40k isn't a lot, but it's very important that players with these debuffs need to be like at least hotted and just try and keep them up as much as you possibly can.
Now the main way the boss does actually generate his rage is through the stances that he does in a set order throughout the fight. Now he has 3 different stances just like a warrior. He has a battle stance, a berserker stance and a defense stance. Now on his battle stance, it's kind of like he just generates 1 rage per second. It's nothing too fancy. That's pretty much all he does.
As well as all the other rage generating abilities that he has.
Yeah. In Berserker stance, it increases the amount of damage he does and the amount of damage he takes by 25%, and it actually increases his the rage he generates by 100%, and this is through his abilities and stuff. So during this phase, he's going to be getting quite a lot of rage, and to be honest, there's nothing really you can do about it. Like in terms of the Sundering Blow, there are other mechanics that you can avoid in order to make so he doesn't take that much rage. So if he is in Berserker stance, things are going to hurt a lot more, but you are going to be able to deal more damage. So you might want to be saving your cooldowns for stuff like during this phase.
Now, in his defensive stance, he takes 10% less damage. However, anytime he takes damage from anyone, he will generate 3 rage. However, this does not apply to targets with a Sundering Blow, i.e. the tank, so the tanks can continue to hit him in this phase without him regenerating any rage. And because of the way that this works, and you want to keep the rage down as low as you possibly can on the boss, during this phase when he is in his defensive stance, you should not be hitting the boss at all. The rage should literally just be standing there, twiddling their thumbs, waiting for him to change his stance.
Now one thing to note that when you are tank switching during this stance is that because the stances do last quite a long time, you do want to be stance switching. When you are picking up the boss, you aren't going to have Sundering Blows on you, so to be honest, you should really wait until you do at least get the debuff on you before you start hitting the boss, because otherwise you will be giving him a lot of free rage. So it's good just to taunt just before he's going to do a Sundering Blow, so you get it straight away and you can start using all your defensive abilities. Now every 15 seconds the boss will use an ability that requires rage, and he can only do it every 15 seconds because after he has cast one of his abilities that use rage, he gets a debuff on himself called Cooling Off, which it just stops him from using any rage abilities. So the ability that he will use will be the one that he can afford, like the most expensive one he can afford. So he has got abilities that cost, I don't know, say he has 70 rage, he's going to use the ability that uses 70 rage, not the ability that uses 30. The more rage he has, the more dangerous, high costing abilities he will use.
Now we're going to go through each ability that he has individually at set milestones, set rage milestones. And to start off, we're going to talk about Heroic Shockwave. Now he'll cast this at 30 rage, providing that his cooling off period is off cooldown. And with this ability, he'll leap to a random player, and it will deal around 300k damage to that player and anyone around that player. and he will also leave 3 like aftershock things. Now after a short amount of time, these aftershocks will like ignite and turn into fire. If you get hit by this fire, the boss will actually gain rage, so make sure you don't get hit by this fire. The fire also hits like a fair amount, it's about 400k. Don't get hit by the fire when it spawns. But apart from that, it's a pretty simple mechanic.
Now at 50 rage, he'll gain an ability called Corcoran Banner. Now basically what he'll do, he'll place a banner that causes any of his allies that attacks, there are allies that he has, we'll talk about the ads in a minute, each time they do anything they'll generate 3 rage for him. This banner has absolutely like no health.
Yeah, it has about 500k, something like that.
You could just slap it once and it'll just die, so kill it very, very quickly. It does cost a lot of rage for him to use, it does cost a whole 50 rage, so it's actually quite a nice one for him to use. As long as you get rid of that banner nice and quick, there'll be no issues.
Now his 70 rage ability is War Song. Now this will do a raid-wide AoE, dealing 50% of players' maximum health for them as physical damage. So when this does come in, you want to use like your personal cooldowns, you want to use your damage reductions. However, because this is physical damage, your armor will reduce this. The tanks, you're not going to take a lot of damage from it at all. And plate wearers, obviously, you'll be sweet as. But just something to keep in mind, armor does reduce it, so it's not a full 50%.
Now at 100 rage, he'll cast something called Ravager. Now this is just a spinning axe that wanders around the room, and basically if it hits you, it will deal 400k physical damage to you, so it's not actually a full 400k armor, it does reduce it, but if it does hit you, it will also give the boss 5 rage to every single time you get hit. So if it does go into a group of like 6 of you and hits you all a couple of times, the boss is just going to throw another Ravager out each time. And it does seem that the first time he does cast this Ravager, it gets like exponentially how many more times he's going to cast Ravager, because people will be hit by this ability and it just sends out more and more and more Ravagers. So all you need to do is move from it. Preferably you don't want to really be able to have the boss have this much rage until very late on in the fight. I think you could even do the fight without him even reaching this level of rage if you do it properly.
But generally the axe itself, it does move very, very slow. It's quite predictable as well. It almost seems to move in very, very straight lines, and then occasionally it'll just take complete 90-degree turns and stuff like that. But it is relatively predictable. It's very slow. Just don't stand near it. And that's pretty much it. The axe itself isn't that bad. So apart from having to deal with all his various abilities in order to minimize the amount of rage that the boss deals, he will also call in waves of ads periodically, and there are 4 different types of ads. Now all these ads can be, you can stun them, you can slow them, you can knock them back, you can root them. However, forms of hard CC such as Hex and Sheep, stuff like that will not work. So you can't just leave them for the rest of the fight, you do actually need to deal with them.
Now the first type of ad that spawns is a Iron Blade. Now these do a whirlwind that lasts for a very long time and it deals mediocre damage. Pretty much just tank it and is absolutely fine. When it goes below 50% HP, it will do a last stand ability, so it gets a bit more health. But that's it. These ads are really low priority. Tanks just pick them up and people can cleave off of them, but these ads you don't really need to worry about at all.
The next ad is the Arc Weavers. Now these do really, really high damage. These guys hurt a lot. They'll do a spamming arcane bolt that deals around 150k damage, and it will also increase the damage they deal by 25% for 10 seconds. That stacks.
It can stack all the way up to 99.
Yeah, so essentially every single arcane bolt it gets off is going to start doing more and more and more damage, and in the end these will start one-hitting you. So it's very, very important that you interrupt these. They also have another ability called Magic Strikes, which will just target a random player and deal about 150k damage. And then it will also leave a dot to that player and anyone within 8 yards of that player for 20 seconds. That does relatively high ticking damage. So you need to make sure that you do dispel it if anyone does get hit by this. Ultimately though, you can actually interrupt the Magic Strikes thing as well. So if you can do that, then you should. And the one thing that's really annoying about these Arc Weavers is that they do randomly blink around.
Yeah.
It's really, really frustrating. However, if you do keep them rooted or stunned, it'll help control them a lot better, so you should do that. And really these guys are sort of not the highest on priority, but are the second highest, really.
Yeah. Now there's another type of ad called the Assassin. Now these pretty much just go around in stealth and start destroying people, but just before they, like, as they spawn, there is a very short period of time where they're not in stealth, and you can actually, like, start damaging them. That can interrupt their stealth, so if you, like, see one and you stun it straight away, it won't perform its stealth, and therefore you can actually kill it fairly quickly. Otherwise, it'll just randomly fixate on a non-tank target and start moving towards them and then start wailing on them when they get there. The very important thing to these ads is that you do not turn your back to them, because they have an ability called Backstab, which does 500k physical damage to you, like every single hit.
So yeah, when these, you can see who's targeted by it, you do get a debuff. You need to make sure that you know where it is. You try break it out of stealth as quick as you possibly can using routes like Frost Nova or whatever you can really, and just face tank them or kite them. You can actually kite them, there's nothing preventing you from kiting, but never turn your back to them. If you turn your back to them, you die. But these aren't that high up on the priority list. They're pretty easy to deal with, so you should look at killing these if there's no Arc Weavers up and if there's no War Shamans left, and we're going to talk about them now.
Now, War Shamans are pretty much the worst thing in the whole entire world. They are the healers of the encounter, and they do percentage-based healing that can affect the boss. It's ridiculous. They do have an Earth Shield that they place on themselves that heals, like, every time they take damage, they heal a little bit up. It is dispellable, but it's not a huge deal. But the two main abilities that are a massive pain in the ass is, one, they've got a chain heal that heals for 10% of the of an enemy's maximum health, and then also it increases, like, its potency by 50% each time it jumps. So it starts getting huge, and that can jump up to 5 targets. That's also interruptible. The worst thing that it does, it places a killable healing tide totem, and it heals anyone within 8 yards for 30% of their maximum health every 3 seconds, so every time it ticks. So if you have one of these next to the boss and the boss is on like 10% health, well, in 9 seconds the boss is going to be at 100% health. It's literally that bad. Whenever you see a chamois, you need to completely destroy them.
So these 4 ads will spawn throughout the fight, and they won't really spam come out. You don't really have to deal with them all the time, but they are up enough for you to keep an eye on them. You do need to keep focused with them, and really you don't really need to worry about any of them. Like, as a tank, you really do want to tank the War Shamans just so you, like, DPS goes on them as quick as possible, so that it's not flying around the room and goes out of range, out of certain range DPS and stuff like that. You just need to make sure the War Shamans die really quick. You want to make sure that the Arc Weavers die just as quick if possible and are stunned. The rest of them, they can just die when they want to die. And really just whoever's not tanking the boss, they're the guys who are responsible for killing the ads. Now, the ads throughout the fight will only spawn in pairs. However, as the fight progresses, they'll start spawning more and more. So occasionally you'll get a group of 3. However, towards the end of the fight at 10%, you'll get absolutely spammed with ads.
So at this point, you kind of have a decision that you need to make. You can either completely nuke the boss and ignore the ads if you think that you can get him down without having to deal with a War Chamois. To be honest, what we did is that we nuked the chamois as soon as it spawned, completely CC locked the chamois, and then as soon as that was dead, then moved on to the boss. Now, the very important thing that you need to know about this transition into the 10% phase, you've got to make sure that a defensive stance isn't coming up anytime soon. So it's preferable to do it just after a defensive stance, or if he's just about to go into a berserker stance even. So, like, you'll be able to do more and more damage to him and get him down even quicker. Because if not, if you're thinking, oh, we'll kill all the ads, then do a bit of damage to the boss and kill all the ads, you're going to get overwhelmed by ads.
Yeah,
100%.
the ads just do keep spawning and spawning and spawning. So realistically, like Alex said, you really want to have, like, a defensive stance around the 13% mark, and either slow or speed up DPS depending on what you need to do to get to that sort of stage. And as soon as that defensive stance does finish at around the 13% mark, you just want to pop Bloodlust and just nuke the living hell out of the boss. Nuke the living shit out of the first War Shaman that spawns, and then just continue nuking down the boss while just CCing and trying to keep all the ads as clumped up and away from the raid as possible. But apart from that, it's relatively simple. It's just all about not having the War Shaman near the boss. If you put the War Shaman near the boss and it puts down a healing tide totem, it's catastrophic.
Yeah, it's really
it's pretty
horrible.
much a wipe. There was a couple of attempts we did where we got the boss to sub 10%, and then suddenly a totem healed him up to like 60%.
It wasn't nice.
We kept going, but we hit the berserk in the end, so yeah, you really don't want to do that. That's really, really bad. But generally, very, very simple fight. It's just all about dealing with those ads and moving from all the other simple abilities. But overall, it's not really that much of a bad fight.
So thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy this guide, then please do give us a like. It helps us out significantly. And make sure to comment, rate, and subscribe.
And if you'd like to see other 10-man Siege of Orgrimmar normal mode guides by FatBoss, please do click up on the annotations you see on your screen now, and that'll take you straight to those bosses. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.